Howdy, listeners. This is your host, Random Nerd, on the Critical Thinking Nerd podcast. As America marks 250 years since the Declaration of Independence, this is more than a patriotic milestone. It is a moment of reckoning, a moment to ask not only what was built in 1776, but what has been preserved, what has been distorted, and what now hangs in the balance. Because the American experiment was never just about breaking away from a king, it was about establishing a form of government rooted in a radically different idea that legitimate power does not flow downward from rulers to subjects, but upward from the people to their representatives. That principle changes everything. And if we are going to talk honestly about 250 years of American independence, then we cannot limit ourselves to fireworks, slogans, or recycled political theater. We have to return to first principles. We have to ask what the founders believed government was for, what Congress was supposed to be, and whether today's political class in all three branches still see itself as servant to the people or master over them. The original philosophical foundation of the American Republic was deeply influenced by natural rights theory, classical republicanism, and a sober view of human nature. The founders did not assume men were angels. In fact, they designed institutions precisely because they knew power attracts ambition, vanity, greed, and self-interest. That is why the Constitution was not written to create unchecked efficiency. It was written to restrain power. And nowhere is that more important than understanding the role of Congress. Congress was meant to be the branch closest to the people, not the most glamorous, not the most in peril, not the most insulated. The House of Representatives in particular was designed to reflect the will, concerns, and grievances of the citizenry. It was supposed to be responsive, accountable, and politically vulnerable to the people's judgment. In other words, Congress was never intended to rule over the people. It was intended to represent them. That distinction matters. The legislative branch was given the authority to make law because lawmaking was considered too important to be left in the hands of one person or one court. It required deliberation, debate, compromise, consent. The people, through their elected representatives, were to have the central voice in shaping the direction of the nation. But that relationship has become dangerously misplaced. Today, too many politicians treat public office not as a temporary trust, but as a permanent career. Too many act less like representatives and more like managers of public perception. They speak endlessly about democracy while governing through bureaucracy, partisan loyalty, executive overreach, judicial activism, donor influence, and institutional self-preservation. And this is not a criticism of one party alone. It reaches across all three branches. In the legislative branch, many lawmakers appear more committed to re-election, fundraising, and media branding than to constitutional responsibility. In the executive branch, administrations of every stripe increasingly test the limits of unilateral power, often governing by executive action when persuasion and legislation fail. And in the judicial branch, courts often pulled into battles that reflect not just legal interpretations, but the broader collapse of legislative courage and constitutional clarity. So the question is not simply whether government has grown. The deeper question is whether government still remembers what it is. Is Congress still acting as the people's legislature? Or has it become a stage for faction, ambition, and institutional decay? Are elected officials still grounded by the principle of delegated authority? Or have many come to believe that power, once obtained, justifies itself? The founders would have recognized this danger immediately. They feared concentrated power because they understood that liberty is rarely lost all at once. More often, it is eroded gradually through complacency, distraction, dependency, legal complexity, civic ignorance, and the slow normalization of government acting beyond its proper bounds. That is why the relationship between Congress and the people was never supposed to be passive. The people were not meant to be spectators. They were not meant to vote once every few years and then disappear into private life while professional rulers handled the rest. The American model assumes something much more demanding: a morally serious, reasonably informed, and civically engaged citizenry capable of self-government. That may be the most difficult part of the entire experiment. A constitutional republic does not survive on parchment alone. It survives when the people understand its structure, defend its principles, and resist the temptation to trade liberty for comfort, truth for tribe, and citizenship for spectatorship. And that is what makes this 250-year anniversary so significant. We are not simply celebrating the age of a nation. We are celebrating 250 years of a sovereign nation established as a constitutional republic, an achievement rare in history and never guaranteed in permanence. That should remind all of us that the American experiment is not a machine that runs by itself. It is an idea. And that idea must be defended daily. Defended not only on battlefields, but in the mind. Defended by paying attention. Defended by understanding policies before cheering slogans. Defended by scrutinizing organizations, institutions, and movements that seek to redirect the future of the United States without the informed consent of the American people. Defended by remembering that self-government requires self-discipline, and defended by refusing to let the language of freedom be used as a cover for the expansion of unaccountable power. This does not mean cynicism. It does not mean blind distrust in every institution. And it does not require romanticizing the founding era as if the early republic had no contradictions or flaws. What it does require is seriousness. Seriousness about liberty. Seriousness about responsibility. Seriousness about representation. Seriousness about whether our institutions still operate according to their original purpose, or whether they now drift under the weight of ambition, ideology, and political hunger. The 250th anniversary of independence should not only stir pride, it should stir memory and duty. Because a free people cannot remain free if they forget what freedom is for, and they cannot keep a republic if they no longer see themselves as its custodians. So, as we mark this historic milestone, maybe the most important question is not whether America has lasted 250 years. Maybe the real question is whether the people still possess the civic virtue, historical memory, and moral courage necessary to preserve what they inherited. That question remains open, and perhaps it always will. As Benjamin Franklin widely remembered as saying when asked what form of government the Constitutional Convention had produced, "A republic, madam, if you can keep it." For truth, transparency, and fairness. If you found this episode meaningful, please continue to listen to my next episode as I dive deeper and research further to share my knowledge with you. Thank you.